Well, you've probably never heard of Jay Jones before. Jay Jones is a Democrat running for Attorney General in the state of Virginia. So why is this Attorney General race in Virginia getting so much attention? Why is it worth national attention at all? Well, so many trends are tied up in what's happening in this race, and Democrat Jay Jones is now in real trouble amidst what's been dubbed the texting scandal. We're going to break all of it down in just one moment. First, of course, make sure to subscribe over at undercurrents.tv for the full premium experience of the show. Subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Now let's talk about Jay Jones. Okay, so around, let's say, this was early October, Jay Jones, he is the Democratic nominee already by this point. A story breaks about him in National Review from the reporter Audrey Fahlberg, who got her hands on some text messages that Jay Jones sent back in 2022, in which he said some truly horrific things. So he was texting at the time a Republican delegate, so a Republican colleague in the Virginia House of Delegates. And I'm going to read a little bit here from the Washington Post. They say the text messages, first reported Friday by National Review, were sent on August 8th, 2022, as GOP delegates were eulogizing a moderate Democratic lawmaker. Jones, a former state House member who had resigned about 8 months earlier, objected to the glowing tributes, according to screenshots of the exchange, which has been confirmed and verified by all people involved. Jones has since apologized. He's been condemned by other Democrats, but importantly, no major Democrat has asked him to drop out of the race yet. We'll get to that in just one moment. This is what he said, quote, "If those guys die before me, I will go to their funerals to piss on their graves. Send them out awash in something." Okay. Spoiler. Put Gilbert, referring to then House Speaker Todd Gilbert, in the crew with the two worst people you know, and he receives both bullets every time. Again, this is from Jay Jones, who wants to be Attorney General in the state of Virginia. He goes on to say even more. Believe it or not, there is more where that came from. So as Jones and Coiner are going back and forth, that's the delegate, Coiner says, "You weren't trying to understand," because Coiner, as the Post says, suggested that Jones had also talked about Gilbert's children dying in the arms of their mother, Jennifer. Why he's even fantasizing about these hypotheticals is beyond me, and I'm sure many of you. Coiner says, quote, "You were talking about hoping Jennifer Gilbert's children would die." Here again, from Jay Jones, quote, "Yes, I've told you this before. Only when people feel pain personally do they move on policy. Only when people feel pain personally do they move on policy." At one point in this exchange, Coiner says, "You weren't simply asking questions and you know it." Jay Jones says, "I genuinely was. I wasn't attacking you. I was trying to understand your logic." Coiner goes back on this exchange we just talked about. "You weren't trying to understand. You were talking about hoping Jennifer Gilbert's children would die." "Yes, I've told you this before," he says. "Only when people feel pain personally do they move on policy." He goes on to say he thinks Todd and Jennifer are evil, that they're breeding little fascists. So, Jay Jones, who wants to be Attorney General of Virginia, says that he was, quote, "embarrassed, ashamed, and sorry. I cannot take back what I said. I can only take full accountability and offer my sincere apology." At the time these screenshots leaked to National Review, the country was still in the middle of mourning Charlie Kirk. So this is early October. Kirk had died just 2 to 3 weeks earlier at that point. And in the midst of this conversation that's still going on now about heated rhetoric in American political discourse, this is a professional conversation between, at that point, former lawmaker and a current delegate about other lawmakers. So in a professional capacity, having these conversations about politics. It is only several years ago, 3 years ago. And now, no major Democrat has called for Jay Jones to drop out of the race. That may change now that just today we're seeing more polling about the odds of Jay Jones actually winning this election. So Jay Jones was in the lead before the text message scandal, and we've seen polling that he was going down, down, down in the aftermath of it. It's starting to look really bad for Jay Jones, even though it continues to look pretty good for the gubernatorial candidate Abigail Spanberger, who is a moderate Democrat, former CIA, talks a lot about that in her background. She's still up on Winsome Earl Sears, who is a Black conservative woman, 52 to 43%, according to USA Today. But Politico notes, Republicans are doing better down ballot. AG Jason Miyares, that's the Republican, leads scandal-plagued Jay Jones 46% to 42%. So that's where you have the top of the ticket going to the Democrat, and then the AG race ending up right now looking like it's going to the Republican. It's a 4-point advantage there. And the lieutenant governor race is now tied as well. A WAPO SCAR school survey, according to Politico, has better numbers for Dems. Spanberger up by 12, Hashmi by 7, and then the AG race tied, which is still motion, backwards motion for Jay Jones, who was basically up everywhere before this text messaging scandal. Jay Jones is also now under fire for a reckless driving charge where he was going 116 miles per hour in a 70 mile per hour zone. That is a problem for Jay Jones because now the amount of community service that he actually ended up doing is under scrutiny. Did he actually serve the time that he was supposed to serve? That is now on the table. He is currently being investigated over that. He was supposed to serve 1,000 hours. So this is from Jonathan Adler, who is a law professor at William & Mary, who writes, VAAG candidate Jay Jones is under criminal investigation for misleading the court in relation to his conviction for driving 116 miles per hour. He avoided jail time by doing community service for his own PAC, his own political action committee, instead of an actual nonprofit. How is he still a candidate? Adler asks below. So this is in the closing days of the election, and Jay Jones is now facing this new scrutiny in addition to the text message scrutiny, and that might be the thing when you start seeing him go down in polling that has National Democrats distancing themselves from Jay Jones. I mean, obviously he's been condemned and all of that, but do they just give up on Jay Jones and start, and even maybe start calling for him to drop out of the race because now they feel like he's destined to lose? It means more, Josh Shapiro, Pennsylvania governor, pretty popular Pennsylvania Democratic governor, is coming to campaign for Spanberger in Virginia over the weekend. Does Josh Shapiro, whose governor's mansion was set ablaze ostensibly by an anti-Semite, Josh Shapiro is Jewish, does he want to say that Jay Jones should stay in the race? And again, it's an attorney general's race. Jay Jones is the person who would be enforcing Virginia law, would be overseeing the enforcement of Virginia law. He has this insane reckless driving charge, in addition to now the scrutiny over whether he did his community service appropriately, and the texting scandal. Do Democrats at this point just throw their hands up in the air, say it is worth it to throw Jones under the bus so we can look like we're taking a strong stance against the reckless language by Jay Jones? Maybe that's what starts happening, because it's been a real problem for Dems to look like they're going soft. So this is a new video of Abigail Spanberger talking about how she says, quote, "The fact that I have to spend even a moment's time talking about somebody else's text message from years ago is something that I am deeply unhappy about." Now, this is a response from the conservative pundit Matt Whitlock, who says, well, if she's sick of questions about Jay Jones, she probably should have called on him to drop out when she first found out that he dreamed about murdering his political opponents and watching their children die. That's a pretty good piece of advice, actually, from Matt to Abigail Spanberger here, because now Democrats are saddled with the baggage of Jay Jones as they try to say they have the moral high ground in this conversation about rhetoric. And obviously the Graham Plattner story plays into all of this as well. I've talked at length about Graham Plattner recently. I think he's a pretty talented political candidate. It's certainly not good for him that he had to cover up a Nazi tattoo he seemed to know, according to reporting, was a Nazi tattoo in the years since he got it, when he was on service, or when he was serving. He's 4 combat tours of duty. He was in Fallujah. He's a Marine. He got it in Croatia sort of drunkenly and didn't know what it was at first. It seems like he didn't just find out what it was, because there's some reporting to the extent that he was kind of bragging about how funny the story was when he worked as a bartender. Ever since, he has all of these old Reddit posts where he's using anti-gay language, making anti-black claims, according to the interpretations of some of his Reddit posts that have since come out in CNN and other places. All that is to say, these are 2 complicating problems for the left, who has been feasting on the story about the White House staffer who said he has a, quote, Nazi streak in a group chat, the Young Republicans group chat story that Daniel Lippman broke in Politico last week, where this group of 20 and 30 somethings in the very toothless and inconsequential Young Republican official group, we're in a chat together making like ridiculous jokes about gas chambers and racism and all of that. This is for Democrats who have been lecturing conservatives on their rhetoric problem, on saying like you've allowed and you've normalized too much fringe rhetoric in your own ranks. This is a real complicating factor for them if they want to use this. We could have a separate conversation, debate, or whatever about the substance, but if they want to use this politically, their decision not to tell Jay Jones to get the heck out of the race over the last month is going to haunt them in Virginia. They will probably lose the attorney general race, and they might actually even have a closer gubernatorial election than they wanted to because of this. They might be forced to spend more money in Virginia in the closing weeks of this, all because nobody told Jay Jones to get out of the race. And their condemnations didn't include calls for him to get out of the race either. So now they're really saddled with this baggage when they thought they had the gifts of these leaked chats. Not so much. It's a real difficulty if they thought that was going to be their if they thought that was going to allow them to just sort of paint the Trump era Republican Party as too tolerant of bad language, bad behavior, flirtations with violence. So this might really come back to bite them. And also, by the way, for pundits on the left, this is extremely difficult. If you're on the record saying that Elon Musk gave a Nazi salute, which was a debate people had. I had that debate. But if you're on the record on that and, saying Graham Plattner should be forgiven for having a literal SS tattoo that even he covered up because he said, wow, I have this. I'm not saying these situations are apples to apples, because I don't think they are. But it really has, I think it is really challenged the left's claim to the sort of undisputed moral high ground on rhetoric and language and violence over the last several days. I mean, the No Kings protests, which were covered as peaceful, and they were peaceful, had all kinds of Jones-esque rhetoric. Megyn Kelly had a great compilation, I think, on her show Monday, of just complete. Obviously, many people have seen the woman who is pointing a finger gun at her neck when someone drives by, talking about Charlie Kirk. That's just one example of many where people are saying, Nazis should be killed, and Stephen Miller is a Nazi, and so he should be killed. There are all kinds of things that came out, and we know how it would have been covered if it were a Trump rally. We know how it would have been covered. It would have been headline news everywhere if 1 to 2 signs said something like that. If one to two people had this violent rhetoric, but it was more than that. And it's barely been a whimper about what we saw from the left in the media. And the point of all of this is that, yes, it's throwing a wrench into Dems electorally in Virginia, but it's also further infuriating conservatives who don't have, conservatives have their own powerful media outlets, and Donald Trump runs the government at this point. Supreme Court is conservative, so there's no need for the right to continue playing the victim. But when it comes to the media that still pretends to be totally neutral, this is a great example of selection bias. When they do cover it, it's not nearly the volume of coverage or the level of concern that you would see if the shoe was on the other foot. And Gallup just found last month trust in media hitting a record low. A record low. That's after 2015, 2016. Everyone says Trump can't win the primary. Trump can't win the general election. And Donald Trump is compromised by Russia, 2017. Trust in media hit what was before then a record low. Trust in mass media, which Gallup has been measuring every single year going back decades, hits a record low. Then ties for another record low, goes up briefly, goes back down to that other record low, and is now at a new record low after 10 years. It's almost poetic that this is 10 years right on the dot since Trump announced his run for the Republican presidential nomination. And there's no reason that media should still be hemorrhaging trust. Of course, my perspective on it is that it's good. Trust in media is low. I would be concerned if trust in media was high, but the media should be more trustworthy, right? I'm glad that people aren't giving trust where it's not due, but completely depressed that the sort of mass media, as Gallup puts it in its polling, hasn't recovered from these sort of early years of the Trump phenomenon where it was glaringly apparent how out of touch the press was. We just keep seeing more heels being dug in, less interest in being neutral, truly being neutral. And I think, this is one of the things. Everyone is to blame for their own rhetoric, their own behavior. All that is absolutely true. One thing that would help a lot is the media saying we're neutral and then acting neutral, or the media journalists admitting that they're left of center. If they're going to be incapable of doing neutral coverage, fine, do left of center coverage. Fine, go for it. Just tell us where you're coming from. Tell the people where you're coming from so that they don't feel insulted and at a loss for what's real, what's not. Tough spot for Democrats in Virginia. There's no question about that. Wanted to break the story down a bit because it's a really interesting one that does encapsulate a lot of national bigger picture trends. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe over at undercurrents.tv for the full premium experience of the show. Subscribe on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll be back here soon with more.